If you want to hit the ground running as a protection warrior in Cataclysm Classic, I've got you covered with everything you're going to need to know. Looking at what race we're going to play, if you would like to be Alliance, I would actually advise Night Elf is the one to pick. That is mainly because of our quickness racial, reducing the chance that we're going to get hit by 2%. Previously, you may think that something like a Draenei or a human, due to their extra hit rating and expertise, may be beneficial. However, with the insane threat we're going to be generating with our defensive stance, this is no longer the case. If we look at our mastery, it's increasing our chance to block by 21% and our chance to be critically blocking by 21%. This, of course, is depending on your percentage of mastery, and each point is increasing that. When we then look at the quickness racial, it's actually estimated this is equal to about 10 mastery gems, which is incredible. If you are, however, going the Horde route, I would advise Tauren, quite simply for their 5% health endurance increase from this passive here. For the stat priority, first, of course, as a tank, we're going to want stamina, increasing our health and survivability. Generally, you may want to get this up to about 10,000 or where you feel comfortable. After that, we are going to go for mastery, which we've just discussed. Then it will be parry and then dodge. And ignore the versatility. That isn't actually a stat yet. That's actually from retail. Oops, my bad. There we go. That looks better. The reason that we do actually want parry over our dodge is for a specific reason. And that's the talent here, Hold the Line. And this is actually going to improve our crit chance and our chance to block after we actually successfully parry. So while parry just does well on its own anyway for a tank, it does mean that parry is actually going to be beneficial over dodge because of this reason. Generally, as a protection warrior, we aren't going to really be gearing for threat generation. As I said, we get massive increase in threat from our defensive stance, which is the main stance we're going to be using as a protection warrior. It is actually 500% threat generation that we're going to be adding because of that. If, however, you would like, for whatever reason, to go down the threat generation route, the stat priority you would take is going to be getting your expertise up to the hard cap of 56, then getting your hit rating to 8%, and then it's going to be strength and crit chance. But again, we don't really need to be doing this because of our defensive stance giving us so much threat generation. For the talents, it probably is no shock to you, most of them are going into the protection tree. Starting off at the top with Insight, increasing the critical strike chance of our heroic strike by 15% and giving our heroic strike criticals a 100% chance to cause the next one to also be a crit. These guaranteed crits cannot then re-trigger that effect forever, of course. We then have Toughness, massively increasing our armor contribution from items. And going on to the next line, we've got Shield Specialization. We will be using a shield as a Prot warrior. You generate 15 extra rage when you block an attack. You generate a 60 extra rage when you spell reflect a magic attack. Rage is up here on the left here, of course, our main resource we're going to be generating and spending as a warrior. We've also got Shield Mastery, reducing the cooldown of your shield block, your shield wall, and causing your shield block to also reduce magic taken by 20%. If you're not sure what these abilities are, don't worry. I'm going to be going through all of them fully in the rotation part of the video. We've already spoken about Hold the Line, so going down to the next line, we have Concussive Blow on a 30-second cooldown, stunning our target and dealing damage. And also Last Stand. This is a really good defensive. Again, I'm going to be talking more over this and any other abilities we're gaining in the rotation part. So that will be Devastate and Vigilance, for example, as well as Shockwave. I'll be talking about those more in the rotation. Warbringer, your charge, intercept, and intervene abilities now usable while in combat and in any stance. That's how we're sort of charging into combat and things like that. And when we're intervening on another ally, we've got Improved Revenge, increasing the damage of your revenge ability by 60% and causing it to strike an additional target. Gaining the Vigilance and Devastate abilities here. And then Heavy Repercussions. While your shield block is active, your shield slam hits for an additional 100% damage. Short and board, increasing the critical strike chance of Devastate by 15%. In addition, when you Devastate or Revenge deal damage, they've got a 30% chance of refreshing the cooldown on your shield slam and reducing its cost completely. Safeguard is one of our last talents in the protection tree, reducing damage taken by the target of your intervene ability by 30% for 6 seconds. We've spoken a fair bit about Intervene, and this is this ability here. It's on a 30-second cooldown, running at high speed towards a party or raid member, intercepting the next melee or ranged attack made against them, as well as reducing their total threat. So if somebody has actually gained threat of a mob, we can literally intervene, reducing their threat, helping us gain some of that threat back, and also stopping that next attack from hitting them. So if you do get a mob that goes awry and is running off trying to kill God knows who, then this is the ability you would need to use in that situation. We do have a really good toolkit for things like this as a protection warrior. And then we've got Shockwave, sending a force of damage in front of you based on attack power and stunning everyone in that frontal cone. Lastly, we've got a few points in Fury and Arms. We've got Cruelty in the Fury tree, increasing the critical strike chance of Bloodthirst, Mortal Strike, and Shield Slam, therefore just increasing our crit chance by a few attacks. And then in the Arms tree, we're increasing the damage of our attacks again by 15% with War Academy, Field Dressing, increasing all of the healing we receive. Of course, that is a massive effect as a tank. It's not just increasing healing by us, but from anyone else coming into us. So basically receiving healing from anyone. And the effectiveness of any of your self-healing by an additional 20%. Then we have Deep Wounds, the last talent we're going to be using. Your critical strikes cause the opponent to bleed, dealing 48% of your melee damage over 6 seconds, adding a new bleed when we're doing melee damage. Looking at the glyphs we're taking, for our prime glyphs, first and foremost, we have the Glyph of Devastate, increasing the crit chance of that spell, and Shield Slam, increasing the damage done by that ability. All quite simple there. Lastly, Glyph of Revenge, again increasing the damage done by that ability. Moving on to our major glyphs, Shockwave, reducing the cooldown, Intercept, increasing the duration of the stun, and Spell Reflection, reducing again the cooldown on that spell. Now for the prime glyphs, these are all pretty much mandatory for this build, but you can swap around some of the major ones if you do need to. Long Charge can also be used, increasing the range of your charge. That's this one here, charging an enemy, generating rage and stunning it on a 15-second cooldown. Or we can go for Rapid Charge, reducing the cooldown of it. So Rapid one, reducing the cooldown, Long, increasing the range. We've gone for the Spell Reflection glyph as well here, but you could also go for the Intercept one, increasing the duration of your Intercept stun by 1 second. If you're doing AoE, however, I would swap a few of these out, and that is going to be by adding in Cleaving and Thunderclap. The Thunderclap one here, increasing the radius of the Thunderclap by 2 yards, and the Cleave increasing the number of targets. So basically, in an AoE situation, we're basically just using these glyphs to help increase how many targets we're hitting with these abilities. You can see Cleave here, sweeping attack, striking the target and a nearby ally, dealing damage, and Thunderclap, blasting enemies within 8 yards for X amount of damage, increasing the time between their attacks. And of course, increasing the range of that increases the chance of us hitting extra targets. For the minor glyphs, I've gone for the Glyph of Berserker Rage, meaning it's going to generate 5 rage when used. That is this utility spell here on a 30-second cooldown. Enter a Berserker Rage, removing and granting immunity to fear, sap, and incapacitating effects, generating 5 rage instantly, causing extra rage regeneration when you take damage. And this is actually going to mean that it's going to generate 5 rage when we use it. The other minor glyphs are interesting. Again, it's up to you on the choice here. I've gone for the Glyph of Battle, increasing the duration by 2 minutes and area of effect by 50% of your battle shout. And also the Glyph of Demoralizing Shout, increasing the duration by 15 per second, and again increasing the area of effect by 50%. The other one you could do is Command, doing the exact same thing, but for your commanding shout. We've got these 3 spells here, and I've tried to separate these into groups on the screen to make it easier for you. We've got single target here, AoE here, defensive cooldowns, offensive cooldowns, utility spells over here, going into combat, kind of charging abilities, stances, and then our shouts. So you can see here when I use my battle shout, both the commanding and battle shout are on cooldown, so they do share a cooldown. Commanding shout generates 20 rage and increases the stamina of all party and raid members, lasting 2 minutes, and battle shout, increasing strength and agility of all party raid members, and generates 20 rage, lasting 4 minutes. The reason it lasts 4 minutes is because of the glyph. We could put command in there and it would do the exact same thing, but for the commanding shout. So depending on which one you're using, depends on which glyph you should be using. And lastly, demoralizing shout, reducing the physical damage caused by all enemies by 10% for 45 seconds. We want to keep this up as much as possible. So how is it all going to come together? As you can see, we've got quite a lot of abilities here that we are going to be looking at, but don't worry, we're going to go through it step by step. So before we even go into combat, there's a few things we want to talk about, and that is going to be our stance. Generally, you are going to be going into defensive stance when you are a tank, decreasing damage taken by 10% and adding 500% to your threat regeneration. We do also have battle stance, increasing damage done and decreasing damage taken, and berserker stance, increasing damage done. Again, mainly we're going to be using defensive stance as a tank. So if we are going into a single target pull, what we can use here is our heroic throw. It's on a 1 minute cooldown and we're going to throw our weapon at the enemy causing damage, and it does cause a high amount of threat, meaning it's a very low chance we're then going to lose threat after using this. Once we've used our heroic throw, we can then charge into battle, charging them, generating rage and stunning the enemy. We can also use our heroic leap at the location we're already at, leaping through the air towards a target location, slamming down and doing destructive force to all enemies within 8 yards. And this is still good to use in single target. If we're going to be pulling an AoE pack of enemies, I'm going to be doing something quite different. We're going to use this ability here, Rend, and this is actually our whole AoE rotation here. So we're going to go in and use Rend, wounding the target, causing them to bleed for a damage over time. So it'll do a damage over time bleed. You can see that debuff on our target. And we can then use Thunderclap. Blasts enemies within 8 yards for X amount of damage and increases the time between their attacks by 20% for 30 seconds. Once we've done that in an AoE situation, we're then going to use Shockwave, sending away the force in front of you, causing damage and stunning all enemies, keeping them in place, therefore, while we use our Rend and Thunderclap to keep up that threat on them. So again, in single target, we're going to use our Heroic Throw, then charge in and use our Heroic Leap, which we can also use in AoE, by the way, because it is going to do AoE damage with Heroic Leap. And for AoE, we're going to go in with Rend and Thunderclap and using our Shockwave to stun them in place. For the actual single target rotation then, once we've gone into battle, we're going to be starting off with our Shield Slam. And then the second priority will be Revenge. You will see here that I can't use it yet, and that is because you can only use it after a successful block, dodge, or parry. So whenever this does light up, it's on a 5-second cooldown. Whenever you are dodging or parrying an attack, you can use Revenge. So number 1, use Shield Slam on cooldown, then use Revenge when you can. Put up Rend on the target to apply that bleed to them. And then we're going to use Devastate, sundering the target's armor, causing the Sunder armor effect. In addition, cause weapon damage, plus 22 for each application of Sunder armor, and that can stack up to 3 times. We do want to stack that debuff on our target. You can see there, Sunder armor, 3 stacks, armor decreased by 12%. So it is 4% per stack. Then we want to look at actually spending our rage, and that is going to be through Heroic Strike. It's on a 3-second cooldown, costing 30 rage, and this is our rage spender. It's the main way we're just be dumping our rage. And you want to use this when you're at 50 rage or over, with the cap being at 100 in protection. Don't forget to keep up either your battle shout or commanding shout, and also your demoralizing one at all times. Don't also forget that with your commanding and battle shout, you can be swapping out the glyph depending on which one you are using, increasing the duration from 2 minutes to 4 minutes. For the AoE rotation, it's pretty similar to what we're doing after we polled. We're going in with Rend, spreading it around with Thunderclap, dealing AoE damage with it, using Shockwave, and then using Cleave rather than Heroic Strike as our filler or rage spender or rage dump. Cleave basically is a sweeping attack, hitting 2 people, dealing damage. If enemies do actually get away from us, what we can do is use this ability over here, our Taunt, taunting the target to affect you, but has no effect if the target is already attacking you. Of course, this is really useful, and if you need to do this on an AoE basis, we do actually have an ability for it. So Taunt is our single target taunt, and Challenging Shout over here on a 3-minute cooldown will force all enemies within 10 yards to focus their attacks on you for 6 seconds. So even though it is a cooldown version, it is actually an AoE version of your taunt. Another thing we can use is Spell Reflection on a 20-minute cooldown, 20-second, should I say, cooldown. Raise your shield, reflecting the next spell cast on you, and that also lasts 5 seconds. We've got a few other utilities that we can use here. Pummel, which is our interrupt, or kick as it's otherwise known, to interrupt our enemy spellcasting. Intimidating Shout, this is on a 2-minute cooldown, causing them to cower in fear, and up to 5 additional enemies to flee, and that's going to last 8 seconds. So again, just some really cool utilities you've got there. Then we've got Vigilance. Focus your protective gaze on a party or raid member. Each time they're hit by an attack, your taunt cooldown is refreshed, and you gain vengeance as if 20% of the damage was done to you. And that will actually last 30 minutes on the person you've cast it on. But it can, however, only be on one target at a time. Now notice how it says on this ability that you're going to gain Vengeance as if 20% of the damage was done to you. If you're not sure what that means, it's actually a protection passive that we have, and it's here. Each time you take damage, you gain 5% of the maximum damage taken as attack power up to a maximum of 10% of your health. So basically then, when we're attacked, we gain attack power up to a maximum of 10% of our health. When we use Vigilance on a party or raid member, we're actually going to get that buff as if 20% of their damage was done to us, therefore increasing our attack power because of the Vengeance passive. It's a tad confusing, I know, but basically just puts on a raid or ally who is going to be taking damage, and we're going to be getting some more attack power from the Vengeance passive. Last one I want to show you here is Berserker Rage, again on a 30-second cooldown. Entering that rage, removing and granting immunity to Fear, Sap, and Incapacitate effects. It's going to grant you a little bit of rage and cause extra rage generation when you take damage. I did also advise you here to put on this glyph, and if you are wondering, the glyph effects do actually update onto the tooltip of your spells, by the way, so you don't have to remember what you've done if you are new to the spec. You can see the 5 rage we generate from it is from this minor glyph. We've then got our defensive and offensive cooldowns. We've got shield block. It's on a 30-second cooldown, so if you can even really call that a major cooldown. It's not, it's a minor cooldown, I guess. Increasing your chance to block by 25% for 10 seconds. In addition, if your total chance to block or avoid an attack exceeds 100%, your chance to critically block is increased by the excess. Then we have Shield Wall, simply reduces all damage taken by 40% by 12 seconds on a 2-minute cooldown. Massive defensive there. Same as Last Stand, temporarily granting you 30% of your maximum health. After the effect expires, however, you do lose that extra health. Then we've got Enrage Regeneration. It does cost some rage. It's on a 3-minute cooldown. You regenerate 36% of your total health over 10 seconds. Can only be used while enraged, and newer enrage effects may not be gained while active. So TLDR, it's going to restore some of your health over a short period. Looking at the offensive ones, we've got Inner Rage, reducing the cooldown of Heroic Strike and Cleave. That's these two here that we're using as our filler spells to spend rage. And that's going to reduce the cooldown by 50% for 15 seconds. We've got Recklessness on a 5-minute cooldown, granting your special attacks an additional 50% chance to critically hit, but all damage taken is going to be increased at that time, so do be careful with that one. And lastly, Retaliation. Instantly counterattack any enemy that strikes you. Melee attacks made from behind cannot be counterattacked, by the way. If you are struggling with how much threat that you are actually generating and rage, etc., Recklessness here can be a really fantastic way of doing that. Remember, it is increasing damage taken, but is granting you a massive extra amount of crit. When using that, you could pair it with something like Berserker Rage, generating an extra amount of rage over a short duration, and therefore helping with how much threat you're going to generate. And also your Battle Shout and your Commanding Shout will generate some rage as well. Although the main rotation, as you can see here in single target and here in AoE, is quite straightforward for Protection Warriors, we do have so much utility that I understand the spec can be overwhelming. So let's just recap what we've learned. We're going to go in with Shield Slam, using that pretty much on cooldown as our number 1 priority, using Revenge whenever we can as our second priority, which can only be used after we dodge or parry, etc. Rend, we're going to put up to apply the bleed. Devastate, we're going to use to get 3 stacks of Sunder armor on the target, and Heroic Strike is going to be our filler. In an AoE rotation, we're using Rend and Thunderclap as our AoE. Shockwave should be used to keep everyone in place, and Cleave will be our rage spender. When we go into the battle, we're going to use Heroic Throw, charge in, and then use our Heroic Leap if it's in single target. And then if we are in AoE, we're basically just going to go in with our main AoE rotation. Don't forget to use your Demoralizing Shout and keep that up on the boss. And also use your Commanding or Battle Shout as you feel you need to, changing out the glyph depending on which one you're using. For taunting, we can use our Taunt for single target, and we can use our Challenging Shout on cooldown if we need to taunt in an AoE situation. We've got our Pummel as our main interrupt, our Intimidating Shout so that they flee, etc. Our Vigilance can be put on an additional ally, helping us get some of our Vengeance passive. And we can use things like Berserker Rage and Recklessness together if we're struggling with any threat or rage regeneration. We've got Inner Rage as well, reducing the cooldown on our abilities that can also help with that. And Retaliation as well, counterattacking our target. For defensive cooldowns, we've got Shield Block, increasing our chance to block Shield Wall, massively reducing damage taken. Last Stand, increasing our health, but we will lose that amount of health when it ends. Enrage Regeneration, regenerating our health over 10 seconds. And Rallying Cry, temporary, I don't think I mentioned this one actually. Rallying Cry, temporarily granting you and ally raid members 20% of maximum health for 10 seconds. And this also stacks or shares a cooldown with Last Stand, the same way that Commanding and Battle Shout also do. Looking at the consumables you're going to want as a protection warrior, Flask of Steel Skin is going to massively increase your stamina, for 450 for an hour. If you are an alchemist, you can actually increase this with the mixology effect, and I do recommend this is a really good profession to take. You can use your Earthen Potion to massively increase your armor, and even see this as a defensive in itself. Lava Scale Minestrone, increasing mastery and stamina. And then if you need a healing potion, it's the mythical healing potion. For the actual professions, again, I've already mentioned alchemy, increasing the effect of your flask. And also, I think enchanting is a great one to take, where you can enchant both of your rings with greater stamina, adding 60 stamina per ring up to 120 stamina. Speaking of enchants, you are going to want to get some reputations done, and I have done a guide. It's in my description of this video for you if you'd like to watch that, because you are going to need the Arcanum of the Earthen Ring and also Pharazane at Exalted to get these. The Exalted Pharazane rep will give you the Unbreakable Quartz one, adding stamina and dodge to your shoulders, and the Earthen Ring, adding stamina and dodge to a head item. There is a revered version that's blue rather than epic for the Pharazane shoulders if you're not at Exalted yet. On the rings, I would go for the Bold Inferno Ruby in red slots, adding strength. A Fine Ember Topaz, adding parry and mastery on your yellow one. Remember, parry is going to be better than dodge rating because of the Last Stand talent we have. The Puissant Dream Emerald is in your blue slot, adding mastery and stamina. And for your meta item, I would go with the Austere Shadow Spirit Diamond, adding stamina and a 2% increased armor value. And that is everything you're going to need to know to succeed as a protection warrior. If you are struggling, watch any part of this video back. There is chapters in the description for you, and you'll see that obviously on the video. And if you are looking for other specs or classes for Cataclysm, check out this playlist that's about to appear here, because this has all of them for you. If you've got any questions, you're not sure about anything, feel free to join the Discord. There's no question too big or too small. I don't mind if you're a veteran or beginner, we're here to help. And if you need any additional help from me, feel free to join my Patreon. A lot of people are watching with ad blocks, etc. these days, and especially in gaming, we don't make much money as creators, especially at my size, from ad revenue, and therefore Patreon is the best way that I can thank you for supporting this channel if you would consider it. I do put LVUI profiles on my Patreon, as well as written guides like how to sim, log your character, and lots of other behind the scenes footage and videos. As I said, written guides, and there's also spreadsheets on there as well. It also accesses a VIP only channel in the Discord where you can ask me questions, etc. And I always check that channel first to make sure that I'm helping you guys where I can as a thanks for supporting the channel. Don't forget to subscribe, leave a like, and let me know your thoughts in the comments below.